Welcome back. The Zero Trust EO I mentioned at the beginning of the program has 6 major components for agencies to meet. Each agency has a strategy to implement those components. Paul Blahusch is Chief Information Security Officer at the Department of Labor. Jim Richberg is Head of Cyber Policy at Fortinet and a Fortinet Federal Board member. He's former National Intelligence Manager for Cyber at the Office of the Director of National Intelligence. Gentlemen, welcome. It's good to see both of you. Paul, I start with you. We'll give regards to my friend Dept at the Labor Department. Where are you and your colleagues on your Zero Trust journey at Labor?
Hi. It's great to be here, Francis. Thanks for the invitation. And, you know, when I think about the Zero Trust journey we've been on, I got to recall back to when I started as the CISO at Department of Labor. This was, I don't know, sometime in 2018. We were actually doing our piece for Cybersecurity Awareness Month. We do quite a show for that at Department of Labor. I was being recorded, a little bit like I am now, and it's like, hey, you know, talk about what some of the goals are for cybersecurity in the Department of Labor. And one of the things on our list, again, this was 2018, was Zero Trust. We're going to start moving to a Zero Trust network architecture. Now, between 2018 and the executive order in 2021, I would say there wasn't a lot that happened with that. It was more a paper thing. Mm-hmm. But boy, did that executive order sort of light a fuse then. Like, okay, we need to now move in that direction. So what have we done? And I think one thing was that we were able to start from a really good base. And a lot of people say the base for Zero Trust is identity. Well, if there was one area of the Zero Trust portfolio that Department of Labor was sort of out ahead about, it was identity. We were really strong already in trying to consolidate all our identity sources into one and then leverage that for people authenticating into resources. Mm-hmm. So we had a good base there, but we took a look around and said, well, now what else do we need to do? You know, there's all those little pillars and stuff that CISO put out, all those different ways to think about Zero Trust, whether it's the NIST guidance or DoD or whatever. So well, what do we need? We said, this idea, this concept of taking what was kind of a fortification approach, right? We've got our perimeter and we're good inside and we don't trust these people outside. We got to take that and turn that around to say that we need to be able to secure from everywhere for everything. And we looked at how are we going to, what's out there to do that? And we sort of focused in on the secure access service edge solutions. We looked at, you know, some of the product vendors in that space and we chose one. And we made a commitment to go in that direction. And we're about a year into that now, because that was 2023, March, when we made a purchase in that area. And we've moved along pretty well. We have a goal of by June of 2024 to have that deployed throughout Department of Labor. So that's sort of where we're at with our Zero Trust journey now. Now, using a SASE solution doesn't buy everything, right? There's a whole bunch of other things that go into that, and we still have a lot of work to do. Not only because just deploying your SASE solution doesn't do a lot until you can turn some of those things on. You need to turn those capabilities on. And that's not the June 2024 target. Right. It's just to get it deployed everywhere.
Sure.
And I mean, I still think we have a lot to do in logging. The enhanced logging piece of it, of getting that information and making it actionable, got a lot to do with data. You know, the identification of your data types, categorization of the data, and then finding a way to effectively and efficiently tag it so you can do something with it. You can monitor and manage it. I think that's where we're at Department of Labor.
Jim, welcome. It's great to talk to you again. I think you and I have been talking about these issues since the days of perimeter protection that Paul referred to.
Exactly.
How does what Paul described comport with what you're seeing across government? I imagine they had an advantage because they had moved out early on the identity piece.
Yes, they did. And I look at Zero Trust and I say it's a good news, bad news story. You know, when I retired from government, I would have fierce, almost theological conversations with my former peers in government who said that Zero Trust could not be done realistically and at scale. Because one of the things I learned when I left government and went to a major tech provider was, oh my goodness, these people have solved a lot of these problems that we're unaware of the solutions in government. And zero trust was one of those issues. And then, and your other guests have said this, Executive Order 14028 comes out, and all of a sudden, government is bought. They're all in on zero trust. The good news is this is a partnership in the sense that government does a really good job creating frameworks, technical reference architecture, strategies, whether they're for the entirety of government with the OMB memo or DoD's strategy. They may have the hardest job. All the implementation tools, and Paul talked about this, are commercial solutions. They don't make their own stuff. They implement it. So we're providing this. So the good news is this really has helped to advance progress on something that is a concept we all agreed was a good idea, even though I find zero trust as an off-putting label, especially for people in the public sector. Your audience, yeah, we all understand what it's shorthand for. Take it to the general workforce and they still say, what do you mean? I'm in a position of public trust. You don't trust me? It's a safety net. It's a way to help them do their job better. Now, the other good news is prior to the executive order, I'd say some of the Fortune 500 companies were doing things that looked and sounded like zero trust, even though we may not have called them that in the private sector. Since the executive order, the latest statistics I've seen are that over 60% of medium and close to 100% of large companies are doing zero trust as well. So this rising tide is collectively increasing resilience, which is a big focus area. That's the good news, and I'll tease you with the bad news when we...
Well, no, you can't leave me hanging. Now, if you're going to tell me about the good news and say there's bad news, then you have to give me some of that.
So part of the bad news is, okay, 60% plus of the private sector are doing this, but I read a market study recently that said by 2027, most of their efforts were going to stall out when they ran into, and I know one of your other guests talked about integration, vendor integration. A lot of the vendors are getting really good at creating capabilities. Unfortunately, we're in siloed worlds. And it's becoming the most acute when you talk about the policy enforcement points that actually drive your ability to implement zero trust. You've got a whole bunch of walled gardens of how to do this, and unfortunately, it's challenging to say SASE Solution 1 and SASE Solution 2 can share data, can share commands, and the prediction I saw was that 70% of these zero trust solutions implementation was going to hit that cul-de-sac, and it was going to largely be incumbent on us in industry to start finding ways to actually work and play well together on this if we're going to help government make more progress.
Paul, to Jim's point about agencies making stuff, federal CIO about 5 years or so ago when we were talking about the cloud versus data centers said, I don't want to buy stuff anymore. I want to buy services, and this was at the point where that was just starting to ramp up. What does that look like in a zero trust world where you kind of said the same thing a moment ago, and Jim just laid it right out there. Agencies don't want to buy stuff. They want to buy services. How does that fit into the strategy, not specifically the document strategy at the Labor Department, but into the framework, the kind of the worldview of the department?
Well, I think it's integral to the worldview, not only for zero trust, but for the way we operate. We've been moving for quite some time from the legacy way of doing things, of having a data center, building our own servers, our own networks, and loading applications in there. We've moved over 80% of our capability is now in the cloud. So we've taken that something I can touch and feel model and put it out that it's in a service provider in the cloud. Our security controls with this SASE solution that we have, that's in the cloud. We don't have now things that we buy and start installing in our data center for that. Obviously, there's still a client piece that gets put on people's devices, but we're going more and more towards the service model. We think that's necessary, it's vital, and it aligns with that zero trust architecture academic strategy about how this should work. And that 20% we still have in the data center, I think at least 50% and maybe more of that is planned to be moved out of there. So we're well on our way to being much more fully service-based as opposed to product-based. But I wanted to mention something else about what Jim said, and that is that not only, and it's something I said too, but not only did the executive order open our eyes, but remember what probably led to that executive order coming out, or at least sped it up, crystallized it, and that was SolarWinds. And we realized from SolarWinds that there were so many ways for our adversary to get inside our network that having that sort of architectural philosophy that I can keep bad guys out and only have good guys inside was a fallacy. And we needed to understand that. And maybe, and zero trust, I agree with you. It's such a terrible way for many audiences to phrase this, right? Because they don't get it. But it really is about, we have to establish trust each time there's a connection, because we can't assume trust just because that device or that connection's coming from inside, right? Isn't that the horror movie where the phone call's coming from inside your house?
From inside the house.
Yeah.
That's right. And that's what some folks, I hadn't connected it that way before, but that's what some folks have said this is like, that not specifically framing it, Jim, as an insider threat, but maybe conceptually that's what folks are talking about.
And again, I used to run the National Insider Threat Program, and I am not a fan of the term insider threat because, again, I think, like zero trust, it is a very Manichaean, black and white way of doing something. I think in the aggregate, a lot more risk is accepted and a lot more things happen because people make mistakes. They're trying to get the job done. It's either human error, we don't give them the right tools in some cases. If we, instead of calling this zero trust, had said this is a safety net, this is technology that's here to let you focus on getting the job done, whether it's data loss prevention or whether it's these other things about identity and access management, we've got your back. Not we are the Orwellian big brother looking over your shoulder because we have zero trust. And Paul, you talked about SolarWinds as a precipitant for the executive order. Another thing is, let's remember, this is 2021. We were a year into COVID. And I think if that put the death knell in the thought that agencies can have wired perimeter-based operations, because we were all working remotely at that point in time.
Killed the perimeter.
And we realized VPN-based security was causing our agencies to get penetrated at that point, come inside, and if you could go anywhere, that's part of what made people start saying, I need strong identity and access management, I need microsegmentation. I think it was that combination of looking at a nation-state threat like a SolarWinds and saying the fundamental, we're not going to go back to we're now in hybrid, but the combination of those two things I think were real accelerants of change with the executive order.
And not only that, but at least for us, take it out of the security realm. Our people who were working remotely were getting terrible performance, right? My gosh, I have to sit here and work from home, and I'm getting terrible performance and getting to my Office 365 and getting to my this and that. And we decided pretty early on, people need to get their work done. We need to do something to allow people to get their work done. And then we broke off and said, well, you're going to come in through the VPN for the stuff that's in the data center. But if you're going out to our Office 365 cloud, we're going to route you straight to that cloud. And we were able to do that. We had the technology components in place to be able to do that, and that really saved us on the bandwidth and on the performance and getting people to do their work. Because 100% I agree with you that workers want to get their work done. They want to do it safely. If given the choice, they're saying, yes, I would like to do my work safely so that I don't compromise mission. It's all about mission, right? We want to get mission done, we want to get it done safely. Mission can't be accomplished successfully if it's not done safely. But you're right, we've got to give them not only the tools, but an environment that works for them to do their work successfully. I've always, or too many times, have found that if you make security a barrier for someone to do their work, they will find a way around that barrier that may not be the safest way to do it. So you need to make this seamless. And that's another thing that I like about the zero trust environment that I think is being created at lots of places, including at labor. We're able to sell this not only as a security feature, which I can sell it as that, right? I can talk about, advanced nation-state actors, this can stop this, it stops lateral movement, it's required by the executive order, start seeing eyelids go down, right? Like, okay, he's talking about security again. But if I talk about this is going to allow your staff to get their work done more seamlessly, it's going to allow quicker access to applications because we're not backhauling everything. I was tracking a package for the holidays, right? And it's coming from overseas, comes into New York, and I'm like, oh, great, it's in New York, it's going to be getting here soon. Then it went to St. Louis to the distribution center. And I'm like, okay, well, this is like pre-zero trust, but we were backhauling it's got to go back to the data center. We're going to be able to take direct flights now. We're just going to go right to where it's accessed. And it allows more data sharing. Data as a strategic asset. We can share that, if we do this right, we can share it safely and securely with state, local, tribal, and other federal partners successfully.
Yeah, I find having a conversation and saying, here are the 7 tenets of zero trust, to Paul's point, the eyes glaze over. But if you talk to stakeholders within the organization and say, there are new ways, software-defined networking, cloud, to enable the connection of users, devices, compute resources, and data, regardless of where any of those 4 elements are located and securely. What can that empower? What can that allow you to do in terms of new capability, whether it's greater service level for the remote user? I mean, if you put it that way, it's not, here's a security requirement the executive order says we have to comply with. It's, how can we help digital transformation? How can we enable you to do new things, to do them faster?
It becomes a productivity feature.
Bingo.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Instead, we're starting to run out of time, Paul. We talked about where you are at Labor today. Where would you like to be in a year or 2 years? What does that look like at some future point, Paul?
Well, I think I mentioned that by June of 2024, we've got a target of having this SASE solution deployed to all client devices. And actually, that's a commitment that we have because these are TMF funds. And when you get a TMF award, you've got to tell them what you're going to do with it. They don't give you a loan and go, here, don't worry about what you're going to do with it. So we had to say, hey, here's things we're going to do. And one target we have is to deploy it by the end of Q3, which is June. But if I'm looking out past that, boy, that's just like, having a Ferrari and driving it on your neighborhood street. We've got to get this out.
Yeah.
We've got to get it out so it's doing data loss protection. So it's doing analysis of the trustworthiness of the device and the identity and compiling all those together so we can make choices about, is this connection I want to allow or not? We also need to I think we need to get a handle on that data piece. Because right now, data is more just a big glob of stuff. Yes, that's sensitive data. Everything's sensitive data. But can we start identifying, categorizing it, and tagging it so that our tools can start making sure this isn't going where it's not supposed to go? I think it's very powerful. So those 2 things, I'd like to more fully realize the capabilities and get to data.
Paul, it's great to have you on the program. Jim, great to talk to you as well. I appreciate both of you joining me today.